Hello, everybody. My name is Tim Daniel. Ben Brown is not with us this week due to traveling for college football recruiting, as Isaac is now at Illinois State today for a class for recruiting. So Ben will not be joining us this week, but joining me and filling in for Ben this week, my good friend Mike Perry from Reds Content
Hey,
Plus.
what's going on?
How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. I'm doing better than I feel like a lot of the Reds fan base is right now.
Yeah,
It's too bad.
it is too bad, but we will get this, of course. Before we get into the show today, of course, we have to let you know this is brought to you by our wonderful friends at SeatGeek, or you can use code Riverfront to get $20 off your first order. Our patron faithfuls at patreon.com/Riverfront Cincy, where you also can join us for just a couple bucks a month. Hang out with Mike in there. Mike's pretty active actually in there. It's pretty nice. And then, of course, come hang out with us if you can, July 6th at noon at Smoke Justice in Covington, Kentucky. And I keep seeing myself on camera here, Mike, and I have not had a chance to get to the barbershop. It looks like I'm missing teeth up, like depending the angle for whether my mustache is growing. So I'm really not liking how I'm looking today, but that's all right. We'll make through it.
You look great, man. Don't worry about it.
Thanks, pal. The chat is active today, so I really appreciate it. We got Bob, we got Sydney, we got Dave, we got Josh, and we're ready to kind of get into it. So, man, we're going to go and just start with the weekend that was a really frustrating series against the Red Sox. So Friday, they get a 5-2 win, and Andrew Abbott looks awesome, and they get 2 homers from Candelario. Yesterday, they have a 3-1 lead, and which is a very irritating game down the stretch. 2 runners tagged out at the plate. They bring in Justin Wilson to kind of try to get really important outs, and I don't think he recorded an out, if I remember correctly.
I don't think so.
Yeah, and so they lose that one. And today they lose 7-4. They make a nice little run. They score 3 runs in the 7th, but at one point they were down 7-1. Not Lodolo's best day. You can live with Nick Lodolo having a bad day with how good he's been, but man, I think what really kind of jumped out to me the most is, and I understand the Red Sox were really hot coming into the series. They were winning a lot of games, but these games back to back that they had Saturday and today are just becoming more the regular in the situation of yesterday you have a chance to win and you should have won. And then today you're not competitive for majority of the game. And then by the time the game's out of reach, you string some at bats together and get some hits and score some runs. And this is just this gap that we're kind of going through now that's really irritating with this team in the sense that I think that, look, we're about to be 80 games in. We're about to be at the midway point. But what we're seeing from this is, you and I were kind of talking about before off air, maybe just the expectations we had have made the season far more disappointing than it really is. But at the same point, this is very irritating because they should have been better. And a lot of the things that are going the way they are have just made it a lot harder to watch.
Right. One of the things that I've put in the Slack group too, this makes me even more frustrated at the lack of activity at the trade deadline last year, because remember, we were first place.
Yeah, you remember not too long ago, 11 months ago.
Right, and I remember we were all in the Slack group like, all right, are we getting Verlander? Are we getting Cease? What's happening here? And we got Sam Mull, who's been great, but we needed a lot more than a lefty late reliever. And and I think it just goes to show, we said often that baseball, you don't get to really pick when you're competitive, particularly when you're the Reds, and I think that's what we're seeing right now, and it's frustrating. It reminds me a little bit too. And if you remember at the beginning of the season, there was a lot of those projection systems that came out that put the Reds, maybe a tick below 500, and a lot of Reds fans were really offended by that. Like, no, we're gonna run away with this division, and we have had some luck that has not gone our way. Some injuries and some fluky things that have happened, but makes you look back at those projections. It's like, there are some really smart people that are putting those together.
You're right, and I think that kind of really is starting to be more vivid more and more. Bob said earlier there isn't a rule that you can only win one game in a series. I think the Reds will beg to differ on that.
Right.
It's just, man, and I think too, we're kind of at this point now where I've not really ever been it's the manager's fault guy. I think that's kind of, there's so much he can do. But the mistakes they're consistently making. And I know that the identity of the team is aggressive base running, But those 2 outs at home yesterday were
Yeah.
very easy to avoid.
Right.
Very
Right.
easy to avoid. And then
Sloppy.
the defensive situations, I don't know why they think Stuart Fairchild has the arm that he can throw people out, uh, because
Maybe they saw some of those robbed home runs and just assumed the arm went with it. I don't know.
yeah, I guess because that throw yesterday was like, "What are you doing, man?"
Right.
And I understand that team in the other dugout had Rafael Devers, and that's
Mhm.
fine. But just kind of, and I don't think the gap between the Reds and the Red Sox is much different. Realistically, I think
Right.
that a healthy McLean, a consistently active Marte, you might make a case the Reds could potentially be better than them.
Right. Right.
Sydney right here, perfect. There's a difference between aggressive and stupid.
Mhm.
Totally agree. And I think that what we're kind of running into right now is that stupid is showing a little more than aggressive.
Right.
And at some point, when does the coaching staff kind of be held responsible for this? Ben and I talk every week about just dumb things David Bell says in pressers. And yesterday he did himself no favors once again. But it seems like we're just kind of having this conversation week in and week out now.
Right. And, I'm one of those guys. I know Chad has said similar things in the past. I'm never going to call for anyone's job. So
Same.
that's a rule I've set for myself. But 2 things can be true at once. 1, I'm not going to call for anyone's job. And 2, if the stated goal going into the season is winning the division and they end in last place, like something's got to get done.
Right.
Whether it's Bell or Crawl, look, again, I'm not going to call for anybody's job, but something has to get done.
Yeah, I agree, man. And I mean, if you look at today, like I said, Lodolo was not his best.
Yeah, but he's earned the right to have a bad.
He's earned the right to have a bad game. And if they give up 4 runs,
Mhm.
you're a Major League Baseball team. You should be able to be competitive and fight back.
Right.
And you don't until the game's over. The scoring on the Stevenson double did not give him an RBI, which once again proves to me RBIs are very stupid and should not matter.
Exactly.
The fact that he didn't get an RBI for that today is very frustrating. Yeah, like Sidney said, he was also pitching hurt today.
Right.
I'm never going to be upset at Nick Lodolo. I would have liked if he covered the bag on a ground ball to Candelario at one point, but Josh says, I think Stu was trying to throw to Candy. He should have been trying to throw through him, not to him. Yeah, that's what they teach us in Little League, right? But the starts that Montas had and the start that Lodolo had, not at his best, but still kept you in the game.
Right.
They have to be able to capitalize on this, and I feel like they never can. And I really thought Brent Suter was pitching worse than he really is for a while. So, like, I looked up, he gave up the runs today.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was like, this has been all year. He's been terrible. Realistically, it's not been bad. I think just because I expected him to not give up any homers because he didn't last year with the Rockies, that he wouldn't give up homers here. I was wrong there, but he's still been okay. I mean,
he's been okay.
Yeah, I think where I'm frustrated is that why is Alex Young in Louisville right now and Justin Wilson's on the big league club? Why why are we like still leaning on Lucas Sims, who, depending the day, is either great or awful, and awful seems to happen quite a bit. Right. Why is Lucas Sims coming in games inheriting runners on base? That is where I can live if he comes into a clean inning. I'll take a chance with that. I'm fine with that. When he comes in, there's a runner on second. You know what's happening. It's like Derek Law last year. You knew someone was scoring when they were coming in. So
yeah, whenever Sims starts, this will be a plug for the Patreon. It's worth Sims starting just to see how Bill Lack talks in the Slack group. Because anyone listening, Bill Lack can't stand it when Sims is on the mound, and he just gets so frustrated. So it's the silver lining. It's the silver lining for when he comes in.
Yeah, for sure.
And I say this as a guy that, like, I've rooted for Sims and I like Sims, but you just see the trend line. It's just he seems to really struggle, particularly with runners on base. He should not be pitching in high leverage spots right now.
I agree. So, and the thing that's really frustrating me is we're still having the same conversation. Like, yes, the Reds are definitely in better shape than they were in 22. No one's denying that. No one's frustrated. Like, no one's talking otherwise. But they're still in the situation where they're giving these guys these so let's look at the example this week. Austin Wynns gets caught up and Jacob Hurtubise sent down. Neither one of those guys should be on a major league roster.
Right.
And then it's like, well, actually, we're going to bring in Levon Soto. And it's like, What are the Red Sox bringing in Levon Soto to fill a roster
Right.
spot?
Well, and
Are
it's
the
not
Dodgers it's
right,
like
and that's not the last bench spot. These guys, I heard he started several
yeah,
games.
wasn't terrible for who he is, but
Right. He got on base okay. Did not do well hitting the ball. Fielded well, but should not be starting on a major league roster.
yeah, right. Had that cool triple in the Rocky series. That was
Mhm.
neat, but yeah, I'm with you. That series feels like forever ago. Remember when June started? It was fun. So since the 7-game win streak, the Reds are 4-8. So to put in context, it's been really rough.
But that means another 7-game win streak's coming up, right?
Right? Yeah, you got the Pirates this week.
Right.
I don't have to get any further into that. Apparently, I'm now banned from expressing my feelings about the Pirates. But you get that 4-game set with the Cardinals and then the Yankees. Oh, okay. Sure, guys. We have a shot at those, right?
Oh my goodness. Hey, I said 7-game win streak. So he's 3 versus Pittsburgh, 4 versus the Cardinals. That would turn things around in Cincinnati.
Heck yeah. But hey, you got the Rockies and Marlins, right? You got the Tigers, Rockies, and Marlins, right, for the All-Star break. There's a chance to make up some ground there.
There you go.
Yeah, man. But I just think that I'm at the point where I think the Reds are getting their dudes that are going to have be part of the future for at least 5-6 years. You and I talked about before we came on the air. The maturation of Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo has been the highlight of the season for me, on top of Elly De La Cruz.
Yes.
It's just that these other guys who are getting these opportunities in high leverage situations and getting big at bats that have no business getting these big at bats. I'm not saying Stuart Fairchild's not a major leaguer. I just think he should not play as much as he is, specifically batting leadoff.
Right. It's like Kevin Newman last year. We were talking a little bit before we got on about why is Kevin Newman batting leadoff so many games, and now it's Stuart Fairchild. I just don't get it. I get the argument is that his lefty righty splits are good. But in reality, Stuart Fairchild does not magically become a better hitter when he's facing lefty righties or when he's facing a left-handed pitcher. It's just that he is a better hitter. He hits them better, and there's a whole lot of other things you need to take into account too, like pitch mix type. And is it curveball versus a slider? The extension of the pitcher, sample size. There's a lot of other data points to take into account, but it's like David Bell only looks at righty-lefty matchup and then starts or pinch hits hitters based off of that.
Yeah, and I don't know what he thought he was getting out of his ejection today. I appreciate he went to bat for his guys, but when he goes, it's I'm not fire David Bell guy. But I'm very disappointed in David Bell.
Right. Well, and also he's inherited some teams that were supposed to be bad, but he's also inherited teams or been given teams that were supposed to be good.
Yeah.
And if you look on the whole, David Bell, except for last year, David Bell has consistently underperformed the Reds' win-loss projections for the season.
For sure.
Or better way to say it, the Reds under David Bell have underperformed their win-loss projections outside of last year. And so at some point you start to say, well, maybe last year was the fluke. It's I don't want to, but you just start to wonder.
Yeah. So this is kind of where things stand right now. Obviously, everyone knows they're in last place in the Central. They're still only 3.5 games out of second place, but 8.5 behind the Brewers, and they're 2.5. They are 12th in the wild card, but they're only 2.5 out of the last spot. Hooray, extended playoffs, everybody! Hooray, extended playoffs. Which, hey, I said last week, if the Reds got the last wild card spot, that means they make the playoffs. I'm not going to complain.
Right.
But this is what you run into. This is what this was. Look, I've covered the NBA majority of my career. I see plenty of mediocre teams make the postseason. So,
well, like last year, Arizona got the final wild card spot and went all the way to the World Series.
Yeah, things worked out for them, right?
Right.
Yeah, I was there when the Reds swept them in Cincinnati, and I was like, this team's in the competition with us for the wild card.
Right,
we'll be fine. They go to the freaking World Series. Yeah, so let's kind of get to a couple guys here, Mike, while I have you. Unfortunately, we have not, Ben and I have not talked about this enough this year. We probably should, just because this guy's really easy to root for. But it's time to kind of have the heart to heart conversation about Will Benson.
Do we have to?
No, yeah,
I
because
was told this would be a happy podcast.
you did. I mean, normally I'm pretty optimistic and positive. Look, the chat can vouch for me. But this is not. This has been. I'm trying to figure out like with him. So
Yeah.
for his last 21, his last 30 games,
Mm-hmm.
191 batting average, 282 on base, 338 slugging, 2 homers, 8 RBI, 9 walks, 7 runs, 33 strikeouts, and 68 at bats. Obviously, the highest strikeout rate of anyone in Major League Baseball. Last I saw, I don't know if that's still accurate, but I have to imagine it is.
Yeah, it's the highest strikeout rate, and he has the second highest whiff rate by like 1/10 of a decimal point.
And this is what sucks because we all love Will Benson. I mean, last year he was one of the most fun parts of the season. I mean, seeing his growth and what he did after he came back from Louisville after having that struggle. And Sydney kind of nails it here. Kind of curious your thoughts on this. She says, the issue is he needs to be sent down, but who do we call up? And that's
a great point.
That's nail on the head to me right now, because yeah, I do think he could definitely use a week in Louisville. Kind of just find his swing again, take a deep breath, relax.
Right.
But I don't know, like, who do you bring up? Josh brings up, do you bring up Rhys Hines?
Yeah.
I would love to.
Too early.
Right.
No.
Yeah. If Marte's activated on Thursday, which we're going to get to later in the show, is that where you take the advantage of the Major League roster spot and you have Benson go down for a little bit? I don't know, but where he's at right now, and I don't think he's necessarily been bad in the field. I think he's been a solid outfielder for who he is. Yeah. But right now, there's just something where you can't count on him. Right. It bums me out, man, because he's so fun. And last year he was like one of the highlights of the year. That Dodgers walk-off home run is one of my all-time favorite Reds games. I was there this year for the Nationals game when him and CES went back-to-back.
Well, that's awesome.
So I'm always going to want that guy to succeed. I'm always going to root for him, but this is not good right now.
Right. You know, when I was getting ready for this, I was going into a bunch of his advanced metrics and looking for anything that would give me some sort of indication that his strikeout rates were turning around. His barrel rate's okay. When he makes contacts, it's pretty good. He just doesn't make contact very often. He just swings and misses a lot.
Yeah.
I went back into his numbers even last year, and that's when I realized there was two things different about last year than this year. So one, his BABIP was almost 400 last year, so way outperforming what the league average would be there. And so his batting average was 275, but his expecting batting average was 230. So some negative regression should be occurring.
Sure.
I think one of the other things that's missing, Joey Votto. He attributed Joey Votto to helping coach him through his approach to the plate, being more selective with his pitches. And I just find it really curious that the year Votto's not on the team, the guy that attributes Votto as helping fix his approach to the plate starts struggling again.
Yeah.
It's a major bummer. His whiff rate right now is like over 38%. Strikeout rate's almost 40%. So in almost 50% of his plate appearances, he's striking out. It's really bad on breaking pitches. So 50% of the breaking pitches he's swinging and missing on. It's ugly. There's not really any silver lining to the strikeouts right now.
Yeah, man. It's like, I don't know what to do because, and then, I mean, obviously this has been really disappointing, and Jake Fraley, the other one, where I wouldn't say Jake Fraley's been disappointing contact wise, but only having one home run right now is really surprising. Because I thought those two guys would really be really big parts of this team moving forward, especially against right-handed pitching.
Right.
It's one of the reasons you moved on from Joey is you felt, the team felt like they were comfortable with who they had against right-handed pitching, and you have not really seen any of that. And I think so that's what's really been difficult.
Yeah, it's tough. I know Jake Fraley's had some injuries in the past, and I think one of them was his wrist, right? It seems like a lot of hitters coming back specifically from wrist injuries see that their power really starts to struggle. And so I'm just curious how much that has to do with it, and as
Yeah.
he continues healing, if he'll if we'll see some of that power return. But it is a bummer. It is a bummer. And Jake Fraley is a guy that's really easy to root for too.
Yeah, for sure.
When
Sure.
he's not making dumb base running decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know Friedel's numbers don't look great right now. I'm not worried about him. I
No.
think that he's going to put something together here soon.
And small sample size too. Friedel hasn't
For
played over
sure.
a whole season. It's a very small sample size. I'm not worried about Friedel.
Yeah. Yeah, see this right here. Josh says, I do think the team is missing Votto. The organization undervalues Joey to the young guy's development. I totally agree with that. And that was one of the things I said throughout the offseason was, and I was told like leadership's overrated. And I think right now that doesn't look to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a world where you could have had Candelario and Joey Votto on the team.
Right.
I really do think there's a world where you could have had that. And I think that'd be really nice right now, considering all the other guys who've, friendly reminder, guys, Connor Capel and Mike Ford and Jacob Hurtubise were getting at bats versus right-handed pitching in points this year, guys.
Right.
Friendly reminder.
Oh, and what Nick Kroll, wasn't it that he said there aren't enough at bats for Joey? Like the implication being Joey's not good enough to be on this team, and then you give at bats to Mike Ford and Hurtubise.
Mike Ford hitting third.
Right, hitting third. And,
Yeah.
and we talked about this before we went on air too. There seems to be a big disconnect between the front office and David Bell. So David Bell's starting Mike Ford and batting him third, but then the front office just DFAs him. So is Mike Ford a number 3 hole hitter and worthy of being in a starting lineup or not? Because they didn't even want him on the bench. The front office didn't. They just DFA'd him. So I just
they were
just
like,
don't get it.
Yeah, I don't either, man.
My wife was such a big Mike Ford fan because I was getting so annoyed with him. And so anytime like he could hit a foul ball hard and she's like, see, he's turning it around. And it's just, it never happened.
That's awesome. That's so funny. All right. Let's talk about some happy things. We can talk about some happy things here. Look, and we'll probably bring in the not so happy things to go with the happy things here. But these runs right now that Elly and Jeimer Candelario are on right now.
Oh my goodness, that's fun.
Give me hope that this team can put something together.
Absolutely. So I do not get the Elly hate at all. I do not like yes, he strikes out more than you'd want. And that's that's disappointing. But I think what has happened is he had such a superstar hype around him that if he is not performing like a top 5 player in baseball, people look at him and say he's a disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if any other hitter on this team, like if Friedel was putting up these numbers, people would be like, oh, this is so great, or anyone else. But because it's Elly, we're holding him to a higher standard. The truth is that he has been above average. His WRC plus is 117, so that takes into account
pretty good.
Yeah, that takes into account every aspect of offensive production. He's 17% better than average. He'll likely make the All-Star team. And that was drilling into some of his numbers too, month-by-month splits. June, he has cut his strikeout rate, so it's much closer to MLB minimum or MLB average. So it's at 28% right now. His barrel rate has gone up to 15.7%. That's in that elite tier. So 6 to 9% barrel rate is average. So 15.7 is putting you in that elite MVP space. And his walk rate is also above average. And I should clarify, so major stats nerd, barrel rate for anyone that doesn't know, it's all that is saying, did you hit the ball hard and in the air in such a way that it's like a line drive or likely to be a home run? So it's 98 miles per hour is the exit velocity, and then just in the right launch angle so that this is likely going to land for a hit. The average slugging percentage of a barreled ball is 1,500. So you want people barreling the ball, and that's what Elly's doing. And when you combine that with his speed, you get that superstar. And so the fact that he's already starting to cut down on his strikeouts is really exciting. Well, it'll be interesting to see in July if the strikeouts go back up.
Yeah.
But if he really is, if this is real and he's cutting down on his strikeouts, you could see a monster second half from him.
Yeah, 872 OPS the last 15 games for Elly De La Cruz.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you'll take that any day of the week. And then on the other end, talking about Candelario, so his numbers are a little sillier. He's only got a He's only got a 789 OPS, but
Mhm.
it's because he's hitting bombs. His on base percentage is 269 the last week, but his slugging is 520.
Right.
His last 15 games, though, same situation. His slugging is 684 in his last 15 games, but in
Awesome.
context.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, his OPS, yeah, you're looking at a 322 on base, which is low, but also he's hit 6 home runs in the last 15 games. He had 2 against Boston the other day. He's had
Mhm.
10 in the last month. He's had a 607 slug his last 30 games. So what you're getting from these two guys, and this is great too, because Ben and I were concerned in April, obviously, like we all were about Candelario, like, oh no, is this Will Myers all over again? We just went
Right.
through this. We had this big free agent signing and we had to cut him. And he has completely flipped that. And then Mike, we're really good friends with the guys over at Locked On. We talk about this all the time. They go on our show, we go on their show. And Jeff Carr over there kind of made the point, if you look at his splits, April, he always kind of takes a little bit of time to get
Mhm.
going. May gets a little better, but June and July is when he finds his stride. So
Mhm.
you talked about what Elly could potentially do post All-Star break for the second half. I'm getting pretty excited about what Candelario could also
Absolutely.
do the second half.
Absolutely. Yeah, his season stats look bad because his April was so just atrocious. But you're right. It like all of the, hey, this is Mike Moustakas 2.0 people. They've been real quiet over
Yes,
the
they
last
have.
few weeks. They've been really quiet. And when they signed Candelario, I was one of those people that was scratching my head a little bit because we had so many
Mhm.
infielders. But I liked that he was on our team. It's never a mistake to add talent, and he's a very talented guy.
Yeah.
And so I'm super pleased with how he's been able to turn things around. He's a guy that I find very easy to root for too, and I'm hoping he can kind of take that veteran role and fill the Joey Votto shoes. Not that the Joey Votto shoes can ever really be filled, but maybe he can fill that role a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dave brings up, did anyone see the comparison of Elly and Bonds in their first, I think, 159 games? Pretty darn good comparison. I haven't seen that one. But I think the thing I look at a lot with the Elly frustration that people have is a lot of the things people bring up is the errors. How many Hall of Fame shortstops you see that really struggle with errors when they first got in the
Mhm.
big leagues? One of the Reds play-by-play announcers included, and also the shortstop of the bigger machine struggle
Mhm.
with errors early in their
Mhm.
career, and those guys turned out pretty good at
Right.
shortstop.
Well, and I think it's because he started the season pretty poor defensively. I remember there was one game where he made several errors
Yeah.
in a row. But since then, he's been outstanding. So outs above average is one of those nerdy defensive stats. He ranks in the 96th percentile for it right now. So basically saying he's one of the best defenders in baseball. If you look at the outs above average statistic, it's not perfect. There's other stats you can look at, but it's grading him very, very positively. And I think he's either first or second among shortstops in outs above average. So he's doing really well there.
Yeah.
Now we don't
Sydney,
need to talk about Candelario's defense
yeah.
though.
Sydney says the season has taught me never to underestimate good depth.
Mhm.
1,000%. That
Well,
is 1,000%.
the wild part is that coming into this season, what people said was the strength of this team is its offensive depth.
Yeah.
With bad luck, some negative regression, and just underperformance, it's just added up to have just a really underperforming team overall.
Yeah. What do you take into Spencer Steer's season? Because I know his OPS is lower than we'd all like it to be.
Hmm.
Um, but and I know his slash line does not look great, but I feel like he's still has really competitive at bats. He's not a whiff guy. He's not striking out a ton. He still kind of gets, still
Hmm.
makes contact. Still a lot of he has a lot of loud outs.
Right, right.
So I don't feel like I'm worried about Spencer Steer, where a lot of people are like, "Oh, he's had this big regression." Yeah, he certainly has. I'm not going to deny that, but I still think that he's been solid. I'm not
Right.
disappointed in him.
Right. Yeah, he's fine. He's fine. I think so if you look at his metrics from last year, he outperformed his metrics a little bit. So expecting a little bit of negative regression was a safe assumption. Um, this much, he's now underperforming some metrics.
Yeah,
I reserve the right to change my mind until I have some more stats in front of my face.
absolutely.
But when you look at what he's been able to do in the minor leagues, what he did last year, and the quality of contact he's had this year, I think we can expect him to play better. He hasn't played poorly. You know, I'm not worried about him. I'm not super disappointed. He'll be fine.
Yeah, I've made the case that I think he should be the everyday first baseman, even if they do get Strand back. I just think that he gives them the best chance over there. And I've had some people tell me don't look at his outs above average, and maybe you disagree with me on this, and I'm definitely willing to listen if you do. I don't think I care about outs above average for a first baseman. I feel like it's like someone throws you the ball, it's up to you to either catch it or scoop it. Okay, like fine. So, but apparently his are not very good. But I've seen him do a lot of really nice athletic things at first base. So
that's fine. I'll have to read into that a little bit. I know that there's a lot of WAR calculations too that factor in defense based off of different positions. So like Candelario, last year his WAR was higher because of playing at third base, and his defense was better last year, and his projected WAR was lower if he moves over to first. So I'm curious, Steer, what his optimal spot on the diamond is. I know he's been a second baseman more naturally. Wherever he plays, I'm really happy he's on the team, and I like having that utility guy that you can put in the outfield. You can put at second, you can put at third, you can put at first. It's been great.
Yeah, I know I didn't tell you about a lot of those things. Things are just kind of jumping in my head, but I have you here, and I like talking stats with you. I think guys like India have been great for about a month now, and that's been really nice to see. So even this last week, he's at a 890 OPS this last week.
Nice.
So just kind of seeing what he's brought, considering all the stuff that guy went through. Ben and I talked about a couple weeks ago where it's like we didn't have the conversation of what do you think that he's doing differently. We said the conversation of I'm really happy for him because of all the weird stuff he had to go through this offseason that he's performing has been really nice.
Right. And you know, one thing with India too that I struggle to remember is, you know, he had such a great rookie season, but then over year 2 and 3, because of injuries and weird fluky things, he missed a lot of at-bats, and that's still development time. Like in my mind, because he had a good rookie year, it's like he's a developed player, he's here, but the truth is that he's still developing and he's still improving, and he missed a lot of that development times in his sophomore year and his third year. And so now we're seeing him have more of an extended stretch of health. And as he's played more, we've seen him improve with the bat. And he's provided a lot of value with his on-base percentage and walk rate. His walk rate, I believe, is in the top 15 in all of baseball.
Yeah. He's not chasing much by any means. Right.
So, which makes perfect sense why Stuart Fairchild is batting leadoff then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think Tyler Stevenson's numbers have been kind of fascinating because he's technically slumping, but he's drawing walks. And I love the way he's swinging the bat this year. Man, I'm a big fan of his.
Oh yeah, I love Tyler Stevenson. He's great. He's easy to root for too. And when there's catchers, I give them a little bit more slack with their hitting. You know, it's most of the time catchers don't hit very well. The fact that Stevenson profiles as a catcher that can perform at an above average level with the bat, even if he's just average or even a little bit below, as a catcher, that's still really good. So I give him a little bit more slack.
Yeah, I did too. Dave, actually, the thing he mentioned earlier, he did send this to me in the Slack chat. So I wanted to make sure I went over it real quick. Got to give credit to Reds Daily for the graphic. So Elly at age 22, Barry Bonds at age 22 through 121 games played. Elly has 114 hits, 20 homers, 48 stolen bases, 204 total bases, 519 plate appearances, and a 767 OPS. Pretty great. Barry Bonds at that time, 97 homers, 97 hits, 97 homers sounds realistic for Barry Bonds, don't be wrong. 16 hits, 38 stolen bases, 179 total bases, 525 plate appearances, a 728 OPS. I'm sure we could go down the list of like Ronald Acuna had his ups and downs early in his career compared to Elly and so on and so forth, but that should make you feel pretty good about where he's at.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is Elly is going to become the all-time home run leader. That's what I'm hearing. You're
naturally
making that claim now.
Yeah, he's going to do it naturally. Is at that
naturally? So, there you go. And stolen base leader.
Yep. He is Ricky Henderson, Barry Bonds, and from the left side of the plate, Ken Griffey Jr. From the right side of the plate, Ricky Henderson.
There we go.
All in one, guys.
There we go. You heard it here.
Yeah. Dude, I think the thing with him too that I think, and we talked about earlier, kind of circle around before we move to the next segment. I think people have gotten burned from the Billy Hamiltons and the Nick Senzels and all these top prospects who came up here and really struggled. I think that people kind of put him in that same group.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of insane because, and look, Nick Senzel, we talk about this all the time, through the minors was awesome. This is not like we had this like false hope that like maybe he'll be good.
Right.
Like we had reasons to believe he was going to be successful in the big leagues and had stretches. I know he's going to slump right now in Washington, but has looked really good at times this year. Mm-hmm. And Billy Hamilton was just, we knew what he was. We knew he was very fast. Mm-hmm. Maybe the best defensive center fielder I've seen in my lifetime in Cincinnati, just because of how much ground he could cover.
Right.
But I just kind of think that it's so silly that we would just put Elly in that same circumstance as those two.
Right. And between last year, Elly got called up halfway through the year. So between last year and where we are now, he's played basically a full season of baseball. And I don't have the stats in front of me right now. So I should have looked that up beforehand. So sorry, but I forget what it is exactly, but it's something like 20 home runs, 40 to 50 stolen bases, with a weighted runs created plus of like 98. And so if he was called up at the beginning of the season last year and put up those numbers, we would all be like, oh my gosh, this guy is going to be amazing. But I think it's because he's been a little streaky and some of his down months have been really down months.
Yeah.
That there's this narrative around him that it's like, okay, he's, I don't know if this is going to work out. He strikes out too much. The reality is he is right now already an above average player, and he's only going to get better.
Yeah. Josh brought the conversation of, I would love to see Elly move to center. I think he'd be an absolute stud of a center fielder. Can you imagine the ground he would cover? Nobody would be able to get extra bases on that arm. I agree. I certainly think that if you think about it, yeah, like it'd be hard to think he would fail there. I think for the sake of his shoulder for his career, I think he's probably in the right spot. But if there was like something where we go into spring training 2026 and the conversation is we're going to try Elly out of center field, we don't know if we have a better option. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be mad about it.
Right. I'm curious, when McLean comes back and Marte is back, moving Elly to center field could be an interesting choice. He plays such a slick shortstop. There's that proverb, don't fix perfection. It's like he plays such a slick shortstop. So I would feel weird moving him just because he plays shortstop so well. But you're right, with his speed and his arm, would he be even better in center field? And that would be really fun to watch. Would it be Billy Hamilton, but a Billy Hamilton that could also hit? That would be cool.
Yeah, because the conversation you often hear with Elly, as far as a comp for what Reds fans resemble, is Eric Davis. And you and I are pretty young. So our Eric Davis was not the Eric Davis that people grew up and loved. But of course, we've seen the highlights. We've looked at things. I have an Eric Davis jersey for a reason. I've met Eric Davis, probably the coolest human being alive.
He's cool.
He's like the coolest guy ever. So, people talk all the time with the things he could do. It's interesting. And so, yeah, so people bring it up, if Edwin Roy becomes a big leaguer next year, that also makes that conversation about Elly's future defensive position far more interesting too. And I've also heard, like Josh saying here, I've heard Arroyo was really good at shortstop. Mm-hmm. So if his shoulder heals, awesome. Like I said, I am all for it if it's something where we feel like it, because I feel like it can definitely work. Just the athleticism and the arm strength. And if it doesn't, if it's like we tried it in spring training, it just didn't go our way, we're gonna put him back where he's at, where he should be at shortstop. That's fine too. But yeah, I mean, the idea of it is certainly the right way to go about it. Right. But let's go into a couple things before we get out of here. Obviously now we have the revenge series against the Pirates coming up. Which I was very openly mocked in our Riverfront Patreon that I was not allowed to ask questions about the Pirates when Nate had the guy from North Shore 9 on, which was a good podcast. And I understand that there's a lot of similarities between the franchises, but no, I'm not ever gonna like succumb to saying like I appreciate them. So tomorrow they've got Carson Spires taking the hill against Bailey Falter. Thought he did pretty decent his first start. I know he had a little bit of a rough patch here, but got through it pretty well. Hunter Green versus Mitch Keller 2. That game on Thursday, those two going against each other was so incredible to watch as far as if you like pitching, but obviously didn't get into the Reds' way. And then Andrew Abbott coming off of his awesome outing Friday against the Red Sox, going against Luis Ortiz. So this is you need this series, man. After the week you just had, the stretch you've been on, and this is in your home court. Like, this is your chance to kind of get some wins and get some of those wins back from from last week where you really should have won 2 of those games. I can understand losing the first game, but you won the second game. But yeah, and like Paul Skeens pitched today. You don't have that concern to start the series this time. So
right. Man, I like not facing Paul Skeens.
Yeah, I think we all do.
Yes. It's such an important series because we're getting closer and closer to the deadline. And you put that graphic up earlier about us being like 12th in the wild card, or it's rough. And we're getting close to the space where we need to decide if we're going to buy or sell. And last year, we were first place and only bought one middle reliever, and that was it. And so I'm really nervous that if we don't get really close, they're just going to do nothing at the deadline. We don't really have anything to sell.
Right.
You could trade Frankie Montas, but you're not going to get much in return for him. Maybe send some relievers away. Again, you're not going to get much in return. So really the only excitement we're going to have is if we decide to go all in and build. So you need to start making up some ground. Pittsburgh's one of those teams that's standing above you. If we can win this series, that you feel much better about where we are getting closer to the trade deadline. But if we get knocked even further back, we start to move into the, okay, who are we going to sell? What are we going to get territory?
Yeah. I think that's what's so irritating too, because it's not like their offense is, obviously Brian Reynolds is really, really good. But Brian Hayes has been disappointing. Rowdy Tellez gets a lot of at-bats for that team. Olivares, Triolo, Jack Sawinski, I see all the time Pirates fans are like, can we just get rid of this guy? And the fact that they're doing better than the Reds is very, very, very frustrating because their offense also stinks out loud.
Yeah. I was looking at just team offensive stats before we had this call. The Reds aren't doing great. They're near the bottom in baseball for runs scored and home runs, and I think they are last for slugging. But what's wild is, except for slugging, the Pirates are behind them in a lot of those categories. Behind them in runs scored, behind them in on base percentage. I think it's like they're an overall worse team offensively than the Reds outside of the slugging percentage. But for some reason, we're looking up at them in the standings. So it's that pitching rotation that's holding Pittsburgh together.
Yeah, and I don't get it, man. Why is Mitch Keller still there? Why isn't someone went and got Mitch Keller? I don't understand. It just baffles me because that's a guy that many teams would love to have on their team. I would love if the Reds had Mitch Keller, even with how good their starting pitching spin. All right, man, but let's kind of go to. We got one more thing for you, but like Josh bring up, still on center field, but I think Friedel is good for 3 or 5 years of good production. I don't see him as a 10-year player from the league. We should trade him in a year or so. I don't disagree with that. I think what we saw last year is probably the best he'll ever be.
I agree.
Not to say I don't think he'll be really good. I don't think he'll get hot this year, and I think he'll be really good next year. But yeah, man, I think we were pretty close to that ceiling, and maybe his age plays a part in that, but I don't know. I think that's a really, really good. I think that's a great point, though. It's a really good comment.
Yeah, I feel like the Reds maybe have another year or two of him playing at a solid level, and then we'll probably see that regression. It seems like he's a bit of a late bloomer, and oftentimes what you see in players that boom when they're in their late 20s is once they get to their early 30s, it fades pretty quickly. I would hate for that to happen. I'm a huge Friedel fan.
Same.
Whether it's for the Reds or another team, I hope he has a very long, very successful career. But I feel like it would be a safe bet that he only has a couple more years of strong production left. So if we can be a contending team, he's great to have on the roster. If we're not going to contend, the trade comment makes a lot of sense, which makes me sad because I like Friedel on our team.
Me too. Yeah, I mean, like Sydney says, he was a borderline all-star last year. Should have been the Gold Glove conversation.
Yeah, should have been.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of get into this here before we get out of here. Obviously, this Thursday, Noelvi Marte is eligible to return from his suspension. These numbers have been updated since then. So he had 2 more at bats tonight in Louisville since I did this slide. It's not better, guys. So we're gonna look at this one. This is where we're at, and there's a few things I want to talk about here that kind of came up in the broadcast today. So Marte is eligible to return Thursday. He's now 7 for 47. That batting average and on-base percentage is now 143. No homers, 2 RBI, 1 stolen base, 3 runs, no walks, and only 1 extra base hit at this point. So last year, obviously, he ends the year. Was the hottest hitter on the team last year. He was awesome when he got called up last year. This year, off to a slow start. Obviously, a lot goes into that. You can kind of make the case probably this is his spring training right now, realistically, as he tries to get going. But I'm not really worried about this. I think he's just kind of getting his at-bats in. But today in the conversation that came in the broadcast, and David Bell's talked about this, where it's like you could see him play at third, you could see him play second. He could spot Elly a couple days if Elly needs a day off. Right now, Elly should not even think about having a day off. All right. And then Larkin brings up the point in the conversation of, well, I mean, India's been really good. Santiago Espinal and Candelario have been playing great. If Noelvi Marte is not better than Santiago Espinal, we have problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we have problems. So obviously the jolt he can give the team to kind of get them back in this going, and obviously kind of getting closer and closer to being fully healthy and what we expected this offseason is nice. But I also feel bad for him because, anytime he struggles, people are going to be really mad at him for the reason he got suspended.
Right. Yeah, it's a bummer. We can look past the suspension. It's
gone. It's done.
It's gone. It's in the past. He's on his way back. Like, just help the team once you get here, Noelvi. I'm not worried about the bad start in AAA. Like you were saying, this is his spring training, and he's going against players that have been playing for several months. So I'm not worried by that. It's also a super small sample size, just 47 at bats. We have a much larger sample size of the last several years of him in the minor league. So I'm not worried about that at all. He better be better than Santiago Espinal.
Yeah, please.
What is Larkin saying? Oh my goodness. Yeah. Espinal's okay in the field, but that's about it.
Yeah, he's been a really nice pinch hitter.
Right.
But other than that,
Right. What I hope doesn't happen, you see this with some players sometimes that come back from suspensions, is they are really eager to prove themselves and they kind of get in their own head a little bit. And so I hope that he's able to have the maturity to look past that and just play the next game, take the next at bat, and that he's not in his own head. But that's also on the veteran leaders in the clubhouse
for sure.
Which we are missing our Joey Votto for that, and David Bell. So we'll see what happens. I'm not worried about him right now. Even if he starts off slow, I'm not that worried about him.
Oh man, I'm such a big fan of his, and so of course I was disappointed, but the dude's so talented. And,
right.
I mean, the fact that they got him in that trade, don't be wrong, I still very much miss Luis Castillo and love to have him.
Luis Castillo is like my baseball man crush. And so when we traded him, it was like, Noelvi Marte, you have to fill these shoes.
Yeah.
You have my heart broken, man. So maybe it's some of that bias is coloring the way I see Noelvi Marte. But no, I think he'll be okay.
Yeah, I did too, man. I'm excited to have him back, see what he can kind of help with the team moving forward. Yeah, Josh kind of said, kind of piggybacking, it gets to spring training, but with pitching in midseason form, may take him a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. So all that as well. And then Joey Votto this week started playing some minor league games for the Blue Jays.
I hope he has a great year. I hope he plays so well that Reds fans can make fun of Krall for a long time for his statement of Joey cannot get at bats here.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Cindy brings this up. This is kind of low key huge thing. Did you see this? David Bednar's going to the IL.
I did see that. I
Yeah.
did see that. I mean, you hate to see people get hurt, but if someone's going to get hurt, it might as well be someone you're having to play against.
Yeah. I just want to make sure I point this out because of last week's episode, Ben and I had the lengthy conversation about the wonderful restaurant and establishment known as Sheets, who was also sending us t-shirts, by the way, because of that. So thank you to Sheets.
Nice.
They're now officially the jersey sponsor of the Pirates. And since the Pirates have added Sheets to their uniform, they have been losing. So I was not in cahoots when all this came together, but I'm not sad about it either.
There you go. There you go.
I can move past Sheets putting their logo on a shitty uniform. I can move past that.
There you go.
So, yeah, those macaroni and cheese bites will still fill my stomach and joy. So,
fantastic.
Yeah. Well, Mike, thanks for filling in today, man. I really loved having you on a couple times now. What do we have coming up at Reds Content Plus? Anything anybody should know about?
We're continuously updating the site. Myself, Steve, Matt, Kyle, the other writers. What I love about that site is it takes such an analytical approach to the game. So just keep checking out that site. We post new stuff pretty regularly.
Yeah, Matt's a good dude. He's been on here a couple times. I like him a lot. So yeah, perfect. Well, everyone, make sure you're checking out Reds Content Plus, as well as us here at the Riverfront, where you can check us out 3 times a week as far as the Reds podcast side of things. Myself here at Late Night Reds with Ben, the Riverfront Red Show with Nate, Chad, and their hooligans of co-hosts that they have bringing on, like the Bill Lax and the world, and then of course Red Lake Roundtable with Seth Shaner, who is the professional one of all of us, obviously. Check out Welcome to the Jungle with Joe and Parker. I think they have a show this week. I don't know. And then, of course, over at the Riverfront, you check all of our college stuff and NBA Happy Hour, where me, Sean, and Parker have some bourbons and talk about hoops. It's a fun place to be. So, of course, again, this is not possible with any of our lovely friends at patreon.com/Riverfront. Thank you all for everything you do for us. And, of course, if you are going to be in town July 6th, please come hang out with us at Smoke Justice. We would absolutely love to have you. And we'll have a really good time. So on behalf of Mike Perry, this is Tim Daniel. Everyone have a good night, and we'll see you next week.